On behalf of all assembled here today, I should now like to invite our newest alumna, Dr. Carol Off, to address Convocation.
Thank you, Dr. Toswell, for that introduction. I am so touched and moved by it, and I don't feel that I deserve it. I almost didn't recognize who you were talking about there for a moment. But I thank you for that. Chancellor Cowan, President Chakma, faculty members, members of the graduating classes of the Faculty of Social Science, and all of your supportive family and friends, I am deeply honored to receive this honorary doctorate from Western. I'm also deeply intimidated to be here before you. I'm intimidated, first of all, because I was asked to say something meaningful today, something that could make this day more memorable for you. I can't think of anything more memorable than to be finally finished a program as rigorous as yours. But I canvassed members of my staff and family members, anyone I could find, to ask them what was memorable about their own commencement speaker at graduation. And I found that no one, not a single person, could remember if there had even been a commencement speaker. And that includes people who graduated last year. So I felt some pressure relieved from my shoulders there. The second reason I am intimidated is because you're graduating from programs that involve accounting. My father was an accountant, and I have accountancy in my family line, but I personally have a pathological fear of anything to do with numbers. And I have been known to break out in hives within the close proximity of long division or times tables. And that's just not mathematics. Even arithmetic can put me into a protein sweat. So you're all making me very nervous. I'm glad I have this extra velvet on to cover up the rash. My third reason for intimidation is that I graduated from this university. Back in the days when it was called the University of Western Ontario. My degree is in honors English literature, which is as far away from math as I could find. And I am back on this campus where I began my studies in 1977, and that would be 40 years ago. I didn't know how I would feel about being back. In most ways, the campus is exactly the same. But if I look more closely, there are profound changes. In the 1970s, I knew where every single payphone was. A payphone, in case you don't know, is what you had to find if you needed to call someone. And when you located a phone booth, you had to have exact change in dimes and then later quarters. What could you possibly know about that? The bookstore, that now probably sells mostly candles, was where you could get your typewriter ribbons. I had invested in a highly advanced piece of technology when I was at this university. I purchased an electric Smith Corona that had a memory of 6 characters. I'm talking individual letters here. With the push of a mere button, that machine would bounce back and punch out those 6 offensive letters with a shot of whiteout. You are suppressing your awe. That machine was something I had planned to pass on to my grandchildren. It was obsolete within a few weeks. We didn't have buds in our ears listening to all our favorite tunes on personal devices, but don't let our generation claim that their hearing is not just as impaired as yours. We would put a record on the turntable, lie on the living room floor with our head between the speakers, and blast Led Zeppelin till our bodies vibrated. It was groovy. And we had video games. You've heard of Pac-Man. It was crazy stuff. In fact, to have even been alive and thinking in the 1970s is kind of embarrassing. If you look at pictures, just the clothing alone is something you never want to return to. After you've worn a polyester leisure suit, you will never forget it. Well, it's all pretty tame, isn't it? I could never have imagined 40 years ago the world you now live in, the technology that's such a part of your lives. In 1977, I could not have conceived of this campus as it is now in 2017. I did imagine other things, though. I imagined that we would be further along as a civil society. I imagined, no, that's not quite right. I presumed that by 2017, we would be living in a world with equal opportunities for women. It just seems so logical, so natural, so overdue. On this campus in the 1970s, there was an active chapter of the women's liberation movement, of which I was a part. It was laughed at, scorned, ridiculed, but it was effective, albeit in limited ways. 40 years ago, it was commonplace for women to be harassed and teased, not just on a campus, but almost anywhere, especially in the workplace. That is no longer permissible. There are laws and policies to prevent that from happening to you. And women make up more than half of the graduates here today. That's a huge change. Your department didn't exist 40 years ago, but generally in the social science faculty, women were few and far between. And clearly, by looking out today, that is no longer the case. And 40 years ago, you would never see someone with disabilities on this or any other campus because they wouldn't be able to get around. That's changed, probably not enough. But curbs on sidewalks here are ramped, washrooms are accessible, there are elevators where there are only stairs when I was here. That's progress. Such logical things have allowed countless talented people opportunities that were previously denied them. When I got my first job here in London at a store on Dundas Street, minimum wage for women was, by law, less than that for men. Even if you were doing the same job, Ontario had a different wage for us because it was presumed we didn't need the money, but men did. It didn't matter what our circumstances or needs were, our work was simply not as valuable as that of men. That is no longer the official policy. But what has really changed? In Canada, women make up just over half of all auditors, accountants, and investment professionals. The median salary for those Canadian women is $55,000. The median salary for men doing exactly the same job is more than $68,000. Even I can figure out that those numbers are unfair. At the CBC program where I work, As It Happens, we endeavor to find women to interview whenever possible, and it's not easy. When we contact corporations, captains of industry, CEOs, heads of institutions, government ministers, national leaders, we find so few women at the top. I had presumed by 2017 it would not be like this. I took it for granted that boardrooms, chambers of commerce, university departments, CEOs, presidents and prime ministers would be women as often as they were men. And it would be no big deal, just logical. Yet you can still watch an evening of news and hardly see a single female newsmaker. I've attended conferences and panels at universities where not a single woman appears. I have followed congressional hearings, as they did yesterday, for 4 hours, featuring dozens of people, and saw only 3 women. Albeit that's 3 more than I would have seen in 1977, but nonetheless. In the past year, we saw a woman run for the highest political office in the world, President of the United States. She was ridiculed as a woman. Her opponent said she had no stamina. Her opponent, who is now the president, is a man who disparaged women as part of his career. He mocked them, bragged about having molested them, and yet he won the election, despite, or maybe even because, of his record. We have a prime minister who declared that he is a feminist. The world was shocked, some people with delight, others with horror. 40 years ago, I presumed that by now such a declaration wouldn't even be necessary. We would take it for granted that the principles of feminism would be part of our social fabric. In the 1970s, we were just a few years past the most extraordinary revolution for human rights the world had ever seen. The civil liberties movement helped to end a dark chapter of oppression, institutional racism, and bigotry. But in 5 decades, how much has changed? There were Americans who were shocked and appalled to see that a black man was in the White House when Barack Obama became the president. Again, I took it for granted that such a development, an African American as president of the United States, would be commonplace. Instead, it's exceptional. The current US president wants a travel ban against Muslims entering America to exclude people because of their race and religion. And his ideas are applauded by people in many countries, including ours. Here are numbers just from yesterday. Hate crimes against Muslims in Canada have increased 253% in the past 4 years. 32% of people just in Quebec want Muslims banned from this country. That's according to a poll taken just after a gunman entered a Quebec mosque and killed 6 people who were praying. Just as I could never have conceived of the technology of today, I could not have conceived of a near future where regressive ideas would still have so much oxygen. I could not have imagined that we might be, in 2017, sliding backwards in some important ways. Online trolling, racist and sexist tweets on Facebook posts are overwhelming. Our technology is way up here. Our development as a society is still down here. We can communicate with each other like never before. What we are communicating lacks imagination. It's not worthy of our technology. We can do better to make this a fair and equal world. I can see now that we failed your generation. My generation made assumptions, as I did. The job of pushing for those rights was finished. And it wasn't. I just presumed that progress was on course, and I went about my life, enjoying the fruits of those efforts. But we did not go far enough to make sure all of you, and others not here, would be treated as equal members in all parts of our society. You are all going to do very well in your endeavors. You will be senior people in companies, in government, and in industry. Of that, I have no doubt. But it's now also up to you to push the boundaries, to knock down the barriers for yourselves, but also for others. As you climb the ladder of success, look behind you. Offer your hand. Use your voice. Demand a place for yourself, of course, but also for others. Insist on a society that recognizes the talents and the abilities of everyone. Rage against racism, homophobia, and bigotry. As it turns out, you're not quite as intimidating as I thought you would be. You are inspirational. You've worked so hard to accomplish your goals, to have this day, and we are all in this room immensely proud of you. A very wise person wrote that success and happiness cannot be achieved as life goals. You can't pursue happiness or success. Instead, happiness and success are naturally occurring qualities in a life dedicated to something larger than yourself. I wish you happiness and success. But I also wish you a better society, so that one of you, 40 years from now, standing where I am now, will have been proud of making this a better world. Thank you.